What's going on YouTube? Lovecraft's Dreams in a Witch House. An independent video game developer versus an insanely popular Hollywood director and producer who claims to be a huge Lovecraft fanatic. Who did it right? We're going to talk about it coming up next. So Lovecraft's Dreams in a Witch House is definitely one of his most underrated stories, but I would argue it's one of his most important. In fact, it's actually a linchpin that holds his whole universe together. I talked about in my past video the main elements that make up a Lovecraftian story, things like science fiction and demonology and existential dread and things like that, and evolutionary biology. And all of these things are masterfully represented in this story. All you gotta do is look at the antagonists, and you'll see. It's like a panoply of, it's like the Suicide Squad of Lovecraft. You've got Keziah Mason, a witch from the 17th century. You've got this black being from another dimension. You've got an alien that's represented in At the Mountains of Madness. You've got a little rat-human hybrid creature named Brown Jenkin, and to finish it all off, we have the granddaddy of all elder gods, Azahoth, who reigns the interdimensional realm of chaos in between worlds. We'll get to that. So you see, all of Lovecraft's themes are represented here in this linchpin story, which happens to be one of my favorites. So we're going to look at two representations of this story. One, a fairly recent release by an independent video game developer that you can find on Steam. You can play it on PC. I also played on the Steam Deck. But then the other was recently released in Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, which is available on Netflix. So we're going to look at both of these, and you help me decide who actually did it right. So to kick things off, let's kind of talk about the general plot and setting behind Dreams in a Witch House. Your main protagonist is Walter Gilman, and he is a student of mathematics at the fictitious Miskatonic University. This university is mentioned in almost all of his stories. Some of the stories actually take place there. People do research there. They'll reference it, but it's talked about a lot. Mostly because this school tends to specialize in the occult. It has a whole kind of department. It's got a special collections, which also includes the, again, fictitious Necronomicon, among many other kind of secretive and well-protective writings. Well, Walter's a student of advanced mathematics, and he's also very intrigued about the town story of Keziah Mason, who was a witch who was basically condemned back in the days of Cotton Mather. And when they were arresting her, she drew something on the wall and disappeared, and nobody ever saw her again. Well, in the following years, the town talks about occasional sightings of Keziah, and also her familiar, who goes by the name of Brown Jenkin, who's basically a rat-type creature that has the face, hands and feet of a human. So the town is kind of deeply steeped in the lore behind this individual. And sometime in May is usually when bad stuff starts happening, children start disappearing, and other things like that. Walter Gilman is very intrigued. So not only is he going to study at Miskatonic University, but he's going to stay in the house that Keziah lived in and disappeared in. As he's in the room studying mathematics and the occult, he starts to realize in the corner of the room there are two angles that don't make sense. There are these angles that mathematically and architecturally and physically, whatever you want to say, just don't seem to work, right? And he starts to piece together and develop this theory that mathematics may play an important role in the ability to open up a portal into another dimension. And by doing that, you can actually travel into this other dimension and escape out the other side in some faraway planet or even faraway galaxy. I know my Warhammer 40k people are finding that a little bit familiar, right? So he begins to deeply study these things and how he can open up a portal. Well, while this is happening, he starts to have dreams. He gets sick. He has a high fever, and he starts dreaming that Brown Jenkin visits him, the witch visits him. Before you know it, the dreams start to evolve into Keziah actually taking him into the portal. He shows up at other planets. other dimensions. He starts to see the reality kind of in between reality, that interdimensional space. Again, like in Warhammer, kind of like the warp, right? Or they call it chaos, where the being that kind of rules it all and is in the center, and this is the granddaddy of all of the elder gods, is Azahoth. Oh, that's out of... Real quick, really cool plug. This is a ambient, well, they call it dark ambient soundscapes, whatever, from Cryo Chamber. You can get all of their stuff on Bandcamp. Is it called Bandcamp? I can't think right now. But yeah, go to, I think it's Bandcamp. Look up Cryo Chamber, and it has basically every being and character from the Lovecraft universe, and you can listen to about an hour or two of ambient sounds. So this would represent as if you're floating in the chaos realm, and you can hear Azahoth grumbling. You know, these are super cool. I started collecting them. You can see a few of them back there. I've got another stack over there, and then the rest I kind of own digitally. So shameless plug, Crowd Chamber, Bandcamp, check it out. So anyways, Azahoth's at the middle of all of it. And this is all very important for our discussion. So as time goes on, he starts having dreams that they want him to sign this book. They want him to become basically like a lieutenant for Azahoth. They want him to help sacrifice some of the children and things like that. But through the whole story, he's constantly wondering if he's dreaming or not. But of course, he wakes up with rat bites and, handprints on him from where Keziah choked him or grabbed him or whatever. So of course, this all escalates into kind of like a final showdown at the end. And then, as all Lovecraftian stories kind of tend to go, in the aftermath, everybody kind of sees the aftermath and they start to try to come up with explanations for things, but then realize that things are kind of weird at the same time, and kind of leave it at that. So amazing story, very complex, a lot of different characters and a lot of themes represented. So let's look first at the video game developed by Atom Brain Games. Publisher is Bonus Stage Publishing, released in February 16th of 2023. I've played this game a few times, actually. There's different endings and things. So let's first see how this game stacks up to the original story. Honestly, this is going to be very easy. I'm just going to say they absolutely nail 99.9% of everything in this game. Let's start with the characters. Every character is pretty much accounted for. Of course, your main character's name is Walter Gilman. You even have Joe, the guy who kind of lives downstairs in the boarding house. Maskowitz, I think is his name. Joe, well, I didn't write it down, but I think it's Maskowitz. He's a loom maker, just like he is in the story. He tries to get Walter to wear a crucifix and things like that. He kind of fills in some gaps and tells him some stories and things like that. You've got Elwood, who's basically another student. He lives also downstairs in the boarding house. Walter becomes really good friends with him, helps him piece some things out as well. He tries to keep an eye on him when he's sleepwalking. He even stays there toward the end of the story, kind of stays in his apartment, thinking it might be safer. You've even got the Polish landlord who lives there. Now in the story, she's got a husband, but whatever. It's just her in the game. She makes your bed, cleans your room, things like that, provides you with more firewood. You've got the professor who's there at Miskatonic University who kind of helps him a little bit. You've got little Ladislaus, who's a 2-year-old child who gets kidnapped, and his mother. They're in this story, who live, they kind of live in the house in the back alley. So really all these characters are there. They're all accounted for, and they all pretty much do the same thing. Same kind of interactions as in the story. Well, those are just the protagonists. All the antagonists are there as well. Of course, you've got Keziah Mason, who visits you occasionally. You've got Brown Jenkin, who you got to keep trying to stop, fill up the hole in the wall to keep him from coming through. You try to poison him if you can. You've got the black figure, which, I have to say, this is not an African-American. They just call it the black man or the black figure, and he even explains the fact that this is not a human, but it's a humanoid shape, but it's not an African, but he's a large black figure. And you've even got the little ropey cucumber tentacly guy walking around. And again, you do bump into Azahoth. Hopefully you don't. If you do, I think you go insane and the game is over. Which again keeps that degree of that Lovecraftian kind of existential dread where we are just not battling any of this, right? I mean, we might battle the little small things, but as far as the big things looming in the background, there's no chance, right? So it kind of holds to that, keeps that true. So like I said, all the characters are accounted for. What about all the locations? You spend most of your time in 2 places. Up in your room, either studying or trying to sleep, or that's basically it. Or you're in Miskatonic University, which is super cool. You go there for lectures if you want to do better on some of the exams. You get a full school schedule. You have to go to the library and check out books, or you can sit in the library and read books again to kind of up your knowledge on things so you do better on the exams and stuff. But you also have to balance out between doing well on the exams and actually knowing enough to kind of fight what's going on. You have to become well versed in the occult and mathematics and chemistry, because you actually get to use like an alchemist kind of setup, like a chemistry setup, to make certain things like poisons and whatever the witch's oil that's needed to make the portals and things like that. You have to balance that out with sleep. When you go to sleep, you just hope to God you don't dream, because when you do, sometimes you end up in these nether realm areas where physics don't make sense, and there's these weird creatures that aren't quite organic, but they're not quite mechanical. Like I said, physics doesn't make sense. There's no gravity. It's just a very odd kind of like subspace. Again, like the warp in 40K. In the library, there's also an archives area where things are cataloged and put into boxes. If you have to research magazines, newspapers, and things, other articles. And then there's even a special collections area where you have to talk to the professor. You have to get your occult level up high enough. You got to read some of kind of the entry level books that are available in the regular library before he lets you into the special collections to read things like the Necronomicon and other equally dangerous books. So yeah, being a historian and somebody who spent most of my adult life in college, the whole library thing, and it actually got me excited. Maybe it's not for everybody, but there it is. The entire game, you find yourself some nights when you're dreaming, or when you finally get master the portal, you can go to other planets. You go to the planet that is in the book, basically, and you bump into one of those little cucumber creatures, which is kind of a nod to, I think it's Shadow Out of Time or Shadow Out of Space, one of the two. It's just, I can't say enough. This game, whoever created this game, knew this story inside out and backwards, everything there is to know about it. There's literally one thing I can think of that's different than the story, and that's that in the game, Walter Gilman doesn't know anything about Keziah until he moves into the room and he starts experiencing things and talking to people. Then you start to slowly learn more about it. Where in the book, he purposefully stayed there just so he could be closer to where Keziah was and hopefully learn a little bit more about her. That's literally the only thing that's different. And then top it all off with this like 16-bit like Super Nintendo style graphics. Just the icing on the cake. Absolutely incredible. The soundtrack was perfect. I mean, anytime you go into the drugstore or into the cafe, they're playing like some 1920s like swing music. You can hear it kind of playing on a record player out in the distance or whatever. Just everything about this game, absolutely incredible. There's like 10 different endings. Everything from you just kind of like disappear. You can actually fight the witch and end up killing her. Kill Brown Jenkin. Don't kill Brown Jenkin. I mean, you can basically have any kind of ending you can think of based on how you made decisions through the game. So I'm just going to give this game just a 10 out of 10. It's a short game, but it's very enjoyable, especially if you're into Lovecraft. Okay, now we're going to talk about Del Toro's Dreams in a Witch House.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
All I got to say, I was excited. I was super excited when I heard about Cabinet of Curiosities. I like Del Toro, some of his works. I think he's a good director. And also to know that he is a huge Lovecraft, like, nut. The guy's got a statue of him in his house. I think it's in his library or whatever. I'll post the picture right there. But, like, this guy knows Lovecraft. Or at least he should. This makes it look like he doesn't know Lovecraft. He just basically wanted to, he's one of those people where, he enjoys the imagery of it and kind of appreciates it for what it is. Now, I know it was written by somebody else and directed by somebody else. These people did not know, and if they did, they absolutely did not care one bit about the source material even a little bit.
Look how they mess with my boy.
Like, I've seen tons of recreations in my day. This is about as unrecognizable from the source material as you could possibly be. This is kind of like if, Del Toro sits down with the writer, and he's like, okay, here's how the story goes. There's a witch, and she's got this familiar named Brown Jenkin. He's like a rat and a human. And then she can open up doors to other realities. And the person's like, oh, cool, got it. Good, I'll get working on it. He's like, wait, you want to hear the rest? Or, no, I got it. This is good. I know where to go from here. Because that's literally the only thing in the story that is the same. Walter Gilman is played by Ron Weasley. Rupert Grint, I believe is his name. He does a pretty good job. He does a decent American accent, kind of Bostonian kind of sound. But you could hear his English slipping through quite a bit. He doesn't do terrible. Keziah, let me back up. So basically, the plot, now you just heard the plot of the original story, right? Now the plot of this story is Rupert has a twin sister, and I think she died when they were young, right? And then he starts reading up about this Keziah Mason, this witch, who is able to open up a gate to where the dead are, basically. And so he starts kind of like studying it, and I guess there's this drug called liquid gold that's produced by like Native American Indians, and he gets his hands on it, and it's supposed to open up a portal into this realm, right? And he's looking for his dead sister to bring her back. That's the plot. Miles different, right? I could even kind of forgive that in a way. What I cannot forgive is the imagery and the purpose of these portals and the mechanics of these portals. It completely undermines the mechanics of Lovecraft's universe. It really does. First of all, here, I'm going to take a look at his room he's in, right? This thing looks like something like it's a damn hobbit hole or something that tree elves would live in, or like the Keebler elves. There's vines everywhere. There's all this other stuff. I mean, yeah, the house in the original story you could tell it's old, and it's probably not in the best shape, but it's a house. It's a house with a room. There's not trees growing through the middle of it. There's not like things like that happening. So that's the first thing. And secondly, again, the fact that using mathematics and science to open up a portal into another realm that acts as a gateway to another planet or universe is way different than, hey, I'm going to open up this Chronicles of Narnia hole through a brush and come out the other side, and it's something that kind of resembles the Upside Down from Stranger Things, where there's kind of like these undead things walking around. There's really nothing, no reference to Azahoth. There's none of that. So the whole mechanics of how everything works is just completely flipped around. It's kind of like rebooting Star Wars, and there's no lightsabers, and they all have, Jedis have blasters, and I don't know. I can't even explain how ridiculous this is. I mean, this isn't like, they cast like a black female as the main protagonist. That's not what we're talking here. Like, we're talking about, you've seriously dismantled the entire plot of the story, number one, the entire mechanics of how Lovecraft's universe is connected and how it's connected to these other beings and things like that. There's not even the slightest bit of like science fiction thrown in here whatsoever. There's no other planets. There's nothing. There's really, like, it doesn't even come close to capturing what it is. Plot, the purpose, the mechanics, it is all completely different. So when stuff like this happens, I sometimes wonder to myself, like, why? Like, either you hate Lovecraft that much, and I think we've seen that with Lovecraft Country, where the writer just openly says that they hate Lovecraft and his works. At least that's what somebody commented in one of my other videos. So they literally just create these things just to make people upset. I don't know if that was the purpose here. I can't imagine Del Toro having that kind of viewpoint, but I also can't imagine him letting somebody do this. So there you have it. I think you've got my completely biased opinion about who did it right I'm sorry, that's just clickbait, honestly, to talk about the things that I really love. And a good example of how something can stick super close to the source material and something that just goes off the rails to the point where you can't even recognize it anymore. And, I'm just going to leave you with this final thought. Lovecraft, even though there's a lot of things that have been referenced, you could see the influence in certain places, a lot of the stories are still virtually unknown. So as a filmmaker, you have the lazy option of literally taking a massively made story and literally you've got the screenplay right in front of you. Just do it, Just do it. I mean, I get there's some things you can't duplicate perfectly on screen, but good Lord, you've got everything right there. When you recreate something, that's kind of like the filmmaker's lazy way out, and they feel like they have to buff it up or switch things up or do whatever. Why? And I'll just kind of leave you with that. Let me know what you think. If you played Dreams of the Witch House, let me know what you thought of that. If you haven't, you got it. If you are a gamer and you're a Lovecraft fan, you've got to check that out. Some other good ones that are pretty good. The Call of Cthulhu game, released a few years ago. That was pretty good. Sinking City, maybe I'll do a review on that coming up. There were some things I really liked. There were some other things I wasn't crazy about. But again, maybe that'll be fun to do later. If these videos start to get popular, awesome. So we'll see. We'll see how many people watch this, and maybe we'll keep going in this direction. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to cover. But until then, everybody, please be safe, healthy, and be nice to each other.